the Marshall Legacy Series. If you have not done so already, please, after the presentation by Colonel Friend, take a moment to look through our exhibition on the Tuskegee Airmen and look for Colonel Friend's photograph, which is out there as well. In 1939, the newly appointed Army Chief of Staff, General George C. Marshall, had on his hands a daunting task: how to grow the United States Army to fight the coming global war. As he grew that force from a mere few 100,000 men to more than 8 million at war's end, he encouraged all able-bodied men and women to serve. In doing so, General Marshall crossed traditional cultural boundaries. He created special units formed along racial and ethnic lines. The famous Tuskegee Airmen grew from the needs for more airmen in fighter units. As Chief of Staff, Marshall was directly involved in the establishment of the military program for aviation at the Tuskegee Institute. Correspondence between Marshall and Dr. Frederick D. Patterson, president of Tuskegee and held here at the Marshall Library, shows that General Marshall expressed a very great interest in all the developments at Tuskegee Institute throughout World War II. 450 of the pilots who were trained at Tuskegee served in North Africa, in Sicily, and Italy from April of 1943 until July of 1944, when they were transferred to the 332nd Fighter Group in the 15th Air Force. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Friend, our speaker today, was one of those pilots. Colonel Friend is the last surviving member of the 332nd Fighter Group of the Tuskegee Airmen. He flew 142 combat missions over Europe during World War II. Many of those missions as wingman for Colonel Benjamin Davis, the squadron commander, who became the first African-American general in the United States Air Force. After leaving the Army, Colonel Friend began a career in the United States Air Force and served as Deputy Assistant on Launch Vehicles, Foreign Technology Program Director, and Director of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenal Program, UFOs. Before Colonel Friend speaks, we'd like to show you a very special Department of the Air Force film produced just a few years ago in tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen.
The interesting common fact that surrounded all of their backgrounds was that all of them had wanted to fly.
There has never been in the course of time more inspiring words written than those that read, that all men are created equal. Sadly, for many, these same words proved a hollow promise left to echo in time, resounding as a mockery of an equality that would demand years of struggle, overshadowed by bitter disappointment. Equality was to remain an elusive dream. The dim light of hope never blazed brighter for Black Americans than during an era in American history when they began challenging the discriminatory practices of the armed forces. Key to the demands of major Black organizations, such as the NAACP, the National Urban League, and others, was for the designation of centers where Negroes could be trained for work in all branches of the aviation corps. It was not enough to train pilots alone, but navigators, bombardiers, gunners, radio men, and even mechanics. Under this collective pressure, Congress made concession by passing Public Law 18. Under its directive, an air school to prepare Blacks for military service was authorized. 91 of the 100 young Negro college students enrolled in the civilian pilot training program qualified for civil licenses during 1939 and 1940. In spite of all these facts, the Army Air Corps refused to alter its stand and allow blacks to fly. In 1941, with guidance from the NAACP, a Howard University student named Yancey Williams filed suit against the War Department to compel his admission to an air training center. Almost immediately, the War Department responded by announcing that it would establish an air unit near Tuskegee Institute, Alabama. The 99th Pursuit Squadron. Activated March 21st, 1941. The Fighting 99th began training ground support troops at Chinook Field, Illinois. Eager young black Americans received specialized training in maintenance engineering, armament, and communications. Just a few months later, an inaugural address was given at the Tuskegee Institute, initiating the training of black aviators for the United States Army Air Corps. This hard-fought privilege brought with it a great responsibility. The nation was watching, and the fate of future black military aviation rested in the hands of these intrepid young flyers. In a bold and inspiring departure from the expected, the contract for construction of Tuskegee Army Airfield was awarded to the firm of McKissick & McKissick, headed by a black architect and engineer. In July, construction began on the facility for basic and advanced flying training. The first class for pilots consisted of 12 cadets and 1 military officer, Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. It commenced primary flying training July 19, 1941 at Moulton Field. Soon, young Tuskegee graduates would show the world they could not only fly, but fight. Shortly after graduating in the first class of 1942, Second Lieutenant Charles DeBow was stopped on the street by a white civilian and asked, "You one of those new colored flyers over at Tuskegee?" He proudly answered that he was. "Tell me one thing, what do you boys want to fly for anyhow?" he was asked. Shocked but not surprised, DeBow said he couldn't really think of an adequate answer at the time, but afterward realized the simple elegance of his answer. He was flying for his country. He felt he had a job to do for his country and his race. And just as Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver had proven themselves as educators and scientists, he might prove to someone that Negroes could become good pilots and officers. Armed only with their bravery and determination, fueled by dreams of dignity for others like themselves, Lieutenant DeBow and 4 of his fellow pioneers, Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., Second Lieutenant Lemuel R. Custis, Second Lieutenant George S. Roberts, and Second Lieutenant Mac Ross, became the first graduates paving the way for the other 961 black military aviators who were trained at Tuskegee Army Airfield during World War II. Under the command of Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., 450 of the graduates served as fighter pilots, attaining dignity and glory in the aerial war over North Africa, Sicily, and Europe. Flying P-40s, P-39s, P-47s, and P-51 type aircraft, the 99th Squadron became the 332nd Fighter Group, which also included the 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons. Together, they flew 15,553 sorties and completed 1,578 missions with the 12th Tactical U.S. Army Air Force and the 15th Strategic U.S. Army Air Force. And with each and every mission, yet another victory was achieved, not just for the nation, but for a people as well.
The interesting common fact that surrounded all of their backgrounds was that all of them had wanted to fly. Well, I started out with these young people back in a black Air Force in Europe in World War II. Performance is the absolute key in combat. To protect the bombers, to prevent them from getting shot down by enemy fighters, the 99th Pursuit Squadron was an expert in dropping bombs and hitting targets and hitting locomotives. It was also an expert in aerial combat. The 99th Squadron did one thing in Anzio that no other squadron did. It shot down 16 enemy airplanes.
Yesterday I fulfilled one of my ambitions as a combat pilot. I got one airplane.
This was my country. I wanted a piece of it. I had to fight for it. But I'll be damned if I was going to let some other country come in and take it over.
Though no real plans had been made for their usage, by mid-1943, Negro candidates were being screened to determine their relative aptitude as pilots for multi-engine aircraft, as well as bombardiers and navigators. Class 43J was the first at Tuskegee, with about half of its members training in the multi-engine Beechcraft AT-10, hoping that the bomb group program would actually develop. The first air cadets to train outside Tuskegee were the navigators who graduated at Hondo Field, Texas, February 26, 1944. The 477th Bombardment Group was officially activated January 15, 1944 at Selfridge Field. Although the 477th never entered combat due to the war's end, their struggle for equality and performance as military professionals, along with the magnificent wartime record of the 99th and 332nd, led to a reversal of the U.S. War Department's racial policies. In 1946, Tuskegee Army Airfield closed. Shortly after its closing, the former base commander, Colonel Noel Parrish, in discussing the success of the flying school, said the following: "How good were our pilots? How good is any pilot? Our men were good enough to graduate from any flying school in the country. We made sure of that. And working together, we proved it. We emphasized that a pilot or a man of whatever color, size, or shape is just as good as he proves himself to be. Men and pilots have to be considered as individuals. We have had some of the worst pilots in the world right here, and we have had some of the best. In the first place, they flew and fought as men. They may have had pretty good alibis for being failures if they wanted to use these alibis. Or they may have been proud of their group as the only one like it in the world, as they had a right to be. But when the test came, they had to fly and fight just as men. Americans against a common enemy. Today, there are over 425,000 Black Americans serving in the armed forces as an integral part of the defense of this great nation. Their position in the military, their communities, and indeed the world has been attained and preserved through achievement and honor, the direct result of commitment to their ideals and dedication to their dreams.
In the early days at Tuskegee, in addition to the already difficult job of flying, we trained under the additional pressures of segregation. We had no time for self-pity or despair. We were too busy preparing ourselves for a career of service to our nation. The state of our fully integrated Air Force today is a pretty good indication that we did a good job. That doesn't mean that the future will be a rose garden, or that there will not be other obstacles to overcome. Freedom must be repurchased by every new generation. When the Tuskegee flying program was offered to America's black youngsters, we were ready. We had prepared ourselves for this opportunity, and when it presented itself, we grabbed it with both hands. Prepare yourself so that when your Tuskegee appears, you will be ready.
to never have sunlight on your face. You were content to let me shine. That's your way. You always walked a step behind. Well, I was the one with all the glory, while you were the one with all the strength. A beautiful face without a name for so long. A beautiful smile to hide the pain. Did you ever know that you're my hero? You're everything I wish I could be. And I can fly higher than an eagle, because you are the wind beneath my wings. You are the wind beneath my wings.
Freedom must be repurchased by every new generation. Prepare yourself so that when your Tuskegee appears, you will be ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, we spend almost every minute of every day at the Marshall Foundation thinking about history. Today, we are in the presence of history. The way this session is going to work is that Colonel Friend is going to take questions from the floor. Please think about the questions you'd like to ask from Colonel Friend and enunciate them clearly. Colonel Friend, it's a very great pleasure to have you here today. Ladies and gentlemen, please a round of applause for Colonel Robert Friend.
And I really appreciate it. I want to say good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And, since I think it's something that I tell you a little story about General Marshall. Okay. All right, General Marshall. When we joined the war, we found ourselves involved in a lot of joint operations. And every time we got there, we were outranked because all these other countries had marshals. And so consequently, we said we can't do something about this because we don't want to go in there and sometimes we want to be in charge. So they came up with the idea of Silver Seal. It's all 5-star, Jim. Okay, now we equal. So, the difference is, what we gonna call them? So I said, well, shoot, we call them marshals. And Joe Marshall said, no, nobody's gonna call me Marshall. So he called them Joe down. It's a difficult thing sometimes to talk about a subject that a lot of people are too young to know about, or others that it didn't seem too important at the time. And I think that we are now beginning to realize that there's a right way to do the wrong thing. No, you cannot do the wrong thing right, and you can't do the right thing, but you can do the right thing wrong. And I think that in some instances, that was what happened to us. It was a good idea to initiate the idea of desegregating the military, but they should have done it totally instead of partially. Okay, because you were still segregated. But then again, I always tell them, like, think about it. The military is that way anyway. Officers have bathrooms. That's segregation. So like from my personal standpoint, I really and truly happy about the experience. I was lucky enough to be one of the people that was in the civilian pilot training program. And that civilian pilot training program was initiated because of people like Lindbergh and so forth. When these guys were flying around the world, when they passed through some of these countries, they come back and told that, hey, those guys are getting ready for something over there. They're teaching people how to fly and teaching people a lot of other things that are directly taught only one objective, and that's doing ascent. And then there was an Italian general named Balboa, and Balboa flew a flight of amphibian airplanes from Italy to the United States and back. And I think that was a message too. That says, hey, look, we can get to you. Isolation used to be good, no more. We can reach you if we have to. So I think that as a result of all of the things that happened, that nothing could have been finer than the way in which I felt I was treated in the military.
Lady at the back there.
Little friend, what brought you to decide to apply for this program? How did you get into it? And what happened when you graduated from it? Then what?
Well, the first thing, of course, was as a youth growing up, I saw the Zeppelins, and I saw the Zeppelins fly around up there. I did some, once upon a time when I was young enough, wonder where they found people smaller. But after, I used to do model airplanes, and strangely enough, the most favorite airplanes I built were German airplanes. But nonetheless, I read and did that bug, and I wanted to do it. But when Lindbergh and then result and his other compatriots brought back this information, and we started to have programs in the colleges. That was my chance. I stepped forward. So I graduated. I graduated from a flying school in Pennsylvania, and I had pilot's license in 1958.
Like 2 months,
38.
And then what?
And the bug, one is not a bug, you never get rid of it. You want to fly all the time. And so I did apply for the program by the Army at that time, but didn't do it. But later on, they gave me a call. I went in, took all of the examinations. You have to pass a lot of examinations before you go to that program. And then another fact that I can tell you too, right now I'm big about, you talked about the people, you say negation. People that were over 5'9" could not join the Air Force because they were too big for the airplanes. But as the airplanes got bigger, then they started taking them. March of '43, they opened it up and brought in additional people. But anyway, that's my life. When I got into the program, I flew all the airplanes, worked on all the space programs, worked on the unidentified flying object program. I got a chance to meet and talk with a lot of the people and important people in the Senate. All of them are important, but these are the people that were the chair people. I talked to, gave a program to Benjamin Johnson, who was senator and head of the preparedness committee.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Colonel. I have to say that my father was also a member of the Tuskegee Airmen. And I was wondering if you could share how they came up with the idea of the red tails. How they came up, how you decided to have the red tails.
Oh, red tails, that's a good question. And it has no significance whatsoever. That's a really good question. But what I mean by that, it has nothing to do with segregation. It sounded that way initially, but this, when I first got up there, we were flying tactical missions. Tactical missions is supporting ground operations. Those are the kinds of things that we were doing. Short missions, they'll call them sorties. An hour and a half, nothing like that. But so then, when the strategic thoughts came to mind, and they decided that what they would do with these long-range missions, they changed airplanes. Okay, so when they changed the airplanes, they first had 4 groups of P-51 pilots, 4 groups, and these 4 groups were all in the 50th Air Force. Now, when we go out on a mission, what they do is brief you on which group you're covering and which group is going to be covering you, where they're going to pick you up, and so forth. But we cut down on the radio traffic, but at the same time, allow the people to know that, yes, there's the guys that are supposed to give me coverage. Each one of those 4 P-51 groups had a tail color. Ours happened to be red. There was a red stripe, a yellow, and a checkerboard. And that's how the red light came up. You guys could look at there goes the red tail. There goes the yellow tail. Whatever.
Yes, sir.
Colonel Friend, 72 years ago, I was a 23-year-old Army Air Corps tech sergeant. I was a top turret gunner on B-17 flying fortress. I spent 58 missions over enemy occupied territory from Tuskegee, Italy And you and your
Yeah,
squadron
well, I was representing.
escorted us on many occasions. And I thank you, sir.
I'll tell you one thing about those guys. Yeah, they used to tell, when you come up on a bomber formation, you better come in sideways, because if you go down, they'll shoot you.
One of your men would come in and give his wings to us because we were ready for it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's a very, 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 very important consideration. And I'd like to say, the pilot's good. There's no doubt about it. It's a necessary part of the system, but you could not do with those other 10, 11 guys that took care of that airplane. You had a radio man, you had a propeller man, you had a guy to put in the ammunition, guy to put in the fuel, overall crew chief, and everything else. Well, she's still on those airplanes, the world represents a lot of people. And I was happy enough that it's the people that worked on my airplane worked on it, so that I never really experienced a problem that could be traced to lack of proficiency on their part.
Yes, sir.
Colonel, can you tell us a little bit about the casualties that your unit suffered, both in training and in combat?
Well, in training, they used to say that the guys that came there, and I'm talking about now as Caucasian, but let me explain the whole program a little bit so that you can have a better view of it overall. Number one, for the training program is in sections like we have pre-flight. You don't do anything except take ground courses, navigation, meteorology, aerodynamics, marching, and running around doing things for the seniors. Two primaries. The primary job is nothing more than associate you with the aircraft. And the airplanes that we started flying in were a little bit heavier. It was the biplane PT-17, and we flew that. Then came basic. The basic level had training done actually on the installation. The other training was done by Tuskegee under contract to the Army. And all of the instructors were people of color. All of them. And they had two guys overseeing the contract, two majors. And after we got, if you got through primary, then what you would do is go over to the main base, and there you were trained by Caucasians. And they used to say, those guys are out here to do nothing more than teach you how to kill yourself. Say, okay, you're fine. But actually, when you stop and you think about it, if you're doing a job and the next guy does well, and you do the same thing, you sure want to keep pace. I don't believe that there was anybody in there that didn't put forth every effort they had to make sure that the people that they, or to help the people that they were teaching to get through the program. And we used to call it by different names. The guy that was over the whole program, they called him Mother Long. And said he always mothered everybody. He treated them all exactly the same way. The area where we worked in now, it was kind of rough. I only had one incident that I can remember where I was personally involved, and I was the uh, Officer of the Day, and everybody knows the Officer of the Day. Officer of the Day is the guy who's responsible for trying to keep things straight during the hours that the boss man is not on the base, the commander. So the sheriff from the local came down and he wanted to come on the base to pick somebody up. And so I get the call, I go down to the gate, and the guy says, I'm going in there and get this. So I said, you have to wait till morning, so when you see the adjutant general, those are the legal people. You don't let anybody do it. He says, I always do it. Not tonight. He said, so finally he said, give me the phone. So he got the phone, he called Colonel Parrish. Colonel Parrish said, he's in charge, bam. So he turned around, he said, well, I'm going anyway. So I said, and if you do, these guys go shoot at you. And he knew I meant it. And so he said to me, you better never come to town. Well, it was fortunate for me because the next day, I got to notice that I had been selected for a regular commission, and they were send me to school. I never saw him. So I don't know what he had in mind. But yes, the local area, the people found it hard. You know, I did eventually go back to Tuskegee, but that when the Air Force became the Air Force, okay, up until that time we were Army, Air Force, Army Corps, and this sort of thing. But when we became the Air Force, they said, "Oh, what schools can we have?" ROTC, and Tuskegee was one of them. So, meanwhile, I was supposed to go out to the Pacific to support the atomic testing that was going on at the time. And I get this note from the general, and it said that I'm going to go to Tuskegee and teach ROTC. Well, I said, I don't want to do that. I want to go out and do the testing with these bombs. So anyway, I went to see him, and he told me this. He said, we have strict requirements for the instructors. What? Number one, they have to be college graduates. Number two, they have to be regular military people. Number three, they have to be rated as pilot or something like that. He said, so I said, oh, yeah. So he says, well, I don't have many of those. And then he said, because the school has a place something on me. They said, and they want all of them to be people of color. He said, now you see what my problem is. Taking that and say goodbye. And so I went to Tuskegee and had the first program that they had for the Air Force. And of course, the Air Force community, the school community, little people don't know things like the fact that there were actually more people of color than there were of people that weren't. And consequently, you talk about some gerrymandering for the voting. Getting it all right, so you're trying to keep it even. But it was almost impossible.
Sir, how many Tuskegee Airmen are there currently living from World War II?
That's a good question. Okay. That's a good question because I can't answer it. And the reason I can't answer it, I can only answer it partially for you. Okay. Right now, the red tails, and red tail means that they were people who fought in Europe. They're relatively few. There are only 21 left. And I told him already, I don't want to be the last one. Because if I did, I know who's next.
Sir, could you tell me what it was like the first time you got to fly in a P-51 Mustang?
Yeah, absolutely great. That was a very strange thing for us too. We flew P-47 before P-51, and we flew the P-47 for 1 month only, and that was June of '44. On July 4th, for the same year, we flew P-51. And the way I was told was that they put your name up for a position in the flight for that particular day. So I looked up, my name was up there, and then put the airplane and said P-51. So we flew P-51s from the 4th of July, and I'll tell you, it's quite a difference. The difference is that the P-47 was a heavy airplane. Took a long run to get off the ground. P-51 got off the ground pretty quick and all that, but it had its problems too because it was unstable a bit because of fuel in the tank that was behind the pilot. And the other thing was it had a tremendous torque. For those who don't know what that is, the airplane tends to peel to one side or the other once you go. You create ground loops if you don't keep it straight. And but it was much more maneuverable than the P-47. Couldn't get quite as high, and the other thing is it was blasted cold. The P-47 had turbo supercharged, so it has all this hot air, then you use it. And on P-51, the only thing we had was a blower that came on that automatically was barrel switch, and it would come on at 16,500 feet, and it would come on by itself. Engine would pick up again, see the manifold pressures go up and things of that sort. But then it would start to drop again, and we didn't have anything beyond that. P-47 turbo supercharger from the ground up, all the way on, all the time. So it was, from that standpoint, better. But the big part of it all was that we couldn't stay with the bombers as long. Those guys were for like 12 hours, and they needed to have coverage over there most of the time, up until the time that they got to what their primary points for making their bomb run, and then making withdrawal coming out of there. Germans didn't really attack us a lot. They wanted to get the bomber. That's the guy that was hurting them. That's the person that's doing the damage. So, but flying the P-51 was really great, fantastic. You know, the Germans used to have a tactic that they would do a split S, turn the airplane over and go like this. And whenever they got in trouble, they did that. And they could do that in about 6,000 feet. But P-47 would do the same thing in 10,000 feet. So he got away. But P-51 came along and he could do it in 5,000. So he had a problem. So then they had their second option. And that was it. They were running out of pilots, trained pilots especially. So what they wanted to do anything to preserve that pilot, more so than the airplane. So if they got in trouble, bail out. And don't forget that all this is happening over German held territory. So the only thing that happened to them when they bailed out in that situation, they were late for dinner. So we did it, we were prison.
sharing your spirit and experience today. I'd be interested in your thoughts on drone warfare, drone intelligence, given all the changes you've seen in your career over the years in the Air Force.
Yeah, well, I grew with it quite a bit because I went to Korea and Vietnam. But as far as the airplanes are concerned, I was jet qualified. Can you imagine in Selma, Alabama? And I was jet qualified there, and so I flew most of the early jets, and it's absolutely fantastic. No talk. They moved right along, no threat, and only problems were where growth really occurred within the engines, and the Germans had that kind of problem too. Their jet airplanes were superior to ours in speed, and they could attack the bombers and run. You couldn't catch them. But they had one weakness. They ran out of fuel about an hour or 50 minutes, so they couldn't be going long. And the idea was to come up there, make one pass at the bombers and keep going home. And that sort of development I've seen, and then I worked in a space program. And in the early parts of the space program, where they wanted to how a person acted, in isolated environments, where only thing you could do is see nothing but a wall. You couldn't do anything except whatever the job was that you needed to do. They would tell you, we want you to press this button, and this button, but every day at this time. And they can see you and watch the experiment, but you couldn't see them, couldn't talk to them. Isolation is a tough thing. You stop and think in terms of putting people into an environment where they are restricted, totally restricted for long periods. It's hard. And I think that all the growth that we see today, especially here, things, advances in medicine, advances in engineering and so forth, a lot of these things come about because we have a space program, and because we have people who are charged with doing carrying out certain responsibilities and on long periods. And when those guys went to the moon and came back, people don't realize that we were concerned that maybe they picked up something bad over there and they brought back in. So they were isolated for a long time until we were sure they were clean. So it's fantastic to go to. In fact, I still work.
Brad?
Yeah.
What was the longest mission that you were involved in during World War II?
The longest mission was to Berlin, and that was like 1,600 miles round trip, and the airplane had 8 hours of fuel, and we used to get up there and have to do estimates over the bombers, so we weren't getting as far ahead as we thought we were. They were fast, relatively speaking, but not as fast as we were. And so consequently, in order to keep with them, we would have to and stay about 3,000 feet above. And if what you wanted to do was to be able to get between them and they, because that's where we saw all of those jet fighters. Everything had been pulled back, and they had to protect Berlin. And like I said, they used the Autobahn like it was a great big runway. Anytime they ran out of fuel, land on the Autobahn. And they had regular airplanes, Messerschmitts, low nines. There to fly cover to try to protect them while they were vulnerable. And they were vulnerable when they were out of the field. But that was the longest mission we had. And we had guys run out of the field too. Guys on the approach and all of a sudden didn't quit.
Yes, sir.
I just like if you could tell us your most memorable or scariest moment that you know.
Scariest moment? Well, yeah, my scariest moment was I bailed out of the airplane, and I was not sure of whether or not I was over water or not. And it's cold. We had 12 guys go down into the Adriatic, and we recovered only 3 of them. So I said, no, by going down into that water, I was going to be ready. So I was thinking about taking my dinghy and dropping it and opening it out and be open when I got there. But then the reason we wondered why we couldn't see the water, that was a real problem that day. They had tremendous cold, and the door that opens and closes to allow the engine to operate at the right temperature froze. I couldn't move it. So when the engine normally was supposed to be running at about 120 degrees, and all of a sudden I looked down, it's 50. And it just rose up quick. So after I saw the view going down and I couldn't see where, I knew that we were over the Alps, up in that area. So I just bailed out. And fortunately, I did not hit the water. You know what? But I hit on the side of the hill. It was a hilly hill. And I was sliding down the hill until it came to a stop where there was a flat spot. And I was just there taking stock of myself, anything broken, and so forth. And I saw this lady coming with a knife. That's that. And she stopped. So I said, well, I'm in Germany. I mean, in Italy anyway. I don't know whether it's the German part of it, but anyway, I know it's Italy. And so then the eight people came by, 8 men. And one of them spoke English pretty good. And so he kept asking me what's out for. Too hungry. No, nobody. So then he said, you lucky you know Tedeschi. You lucky you know Tedeschi. Lucky you're not German. Is you Tedeschi? So I told him, I'm glad you can see I'm not Tedeschi.
Sir, what do you think, or how realistic do you think the Tuskegee movies, there have been several movies done on the Airmen? How realistic were those movies?
I didn't hear that.
The question was, how realistic are the movies on the Tuskegee Airmen?
Oh, it has some Hollywood. You know, for instance, they showed this guy, the jet went by, he turned around and he caught the jet. He never could have done that. I know either his a lot faster than mine. But what he did in making this movie, incidentally, he had made a complete movie, and he wasn't dissatisfied and threw it out and made this new one. And he used this philosophy. He said, I'll take the experience of several people that were related, put them together, and treat it like it's one person. So that way he didn't have to identify a person to say that's somebody, and this wasn't some specific individual. But there were two people that you could point out, and that was Davis and Roberts. But even there, he had Roberts smoking a pipe and he didn't smoke. But that was nice. And also, you couldn't get in the P-51 from the right side. But he had all the guys getting in on the right side. And you know, there are not enough P-51s to put up the kind of numbers that he wanted. So what they did was to use a computer and electronically add the same airplane. So I said, God, you got all that, I got 7 on them. And the other thing was that he had the tents alongside the runway. You have to do that. Anything happens to the airplane, takes out all of them. So, yeah, they were all over the place, but not close to the runway.
Colonel, thank you for what you've given us. But a couple of questions, if I may. First off, when you took off, you were so much faster than the bombers that you were supposed to be taking care of. When the air was filled with hundreds of bombers, what was that like when you came upon them and you saw that?
Well, we knew there are 2 documents that come to you when you're in a combat situation. One is called the field order and the other is called the ops order. The field order tells you this is why we're doing this. For instance, we're going down and attack the oil field, and the reason we attack the oil field is they don't have any fuel, they can't run anything, and that's what we want to do. Stop. See, and you know, this way, and they explain that. But then along comes the ops order, and that tells you what you are going to do, okay? What your area group is going to do. Now, but the bombers, you're right about the bombers, but we'd be reckless when the bombers go by. That's right, because they had to be out there to get to the same point that we were going to get to in a lot less time. And we would pick them up wherever that point was. We were told to pick them up at the initial point. That's what we do. And we get there at the same time. But they would just leave a lot earlier.
I think what I meant was, as you're coming up on it, realizing that, you know, anything could happen at any one given time, there must have been a moment where you looked at that and you said, my God, what a sight that must be.
Well, we could see the bombers clear enough, and they had symbols on their tails too, a lot more complex than ours. Ours was just a color, but they used to have letters and everything else, where they were going to fly the box and so forth, and they would get into these formations. We could recognize it. The Germans didn't have anything like those kinds of numbers to put up there. And not bomber aircraft. They had bomber aircraft, but not like that. If they would have sent that kind of stuff to England, the war would have been over. The wrong way. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, on a lighter side, what's in Area 51?
Well, what's in Area 51? Area 51 is exactly what you expect. Is a place where highly classified aircraft and systems and whatever was developed. I worked in missile systems, and we had black programs, you know, and the reason is that you have it as You know, people look at something and say something has security clearance. Sure it does. But there are lots of reasons why you have security. Well, number one, you don't want the other guy to know that you know. You don't want him to know that. So consequently, that makes you can't go out and say, it's something I don't know. You just don't know, and you never bring it to the surface. The other thing is that when they find out that there's certain information which you know, they can start thinking, now, how could they get that information? And some poor guy who's sitting over there collecting this information, putting it into a system where you can pick it up, then he's in trouble. You know, the Germans are very intelligent people, you know. We know that because we brought so many of them over here. Von Braun out, Von Braun and I will put the same thing.
We've probably got time for one more question.
Yeah.
Colonel Friend, can you give us a story about your work with UFOs when you were director of the UFO program?
Yeah. They're real. The thing about it is that you're what? What we're trying to do, especially with college, is to have them have an appreciation of the fact that by knowing what something is, makes your defense system that much stronger. And the reason it makes it stronger is because you don't start to respond to things that anybody might put up there just for using them, having you be distracted. You know, one of the things that used to happen in the UFO program, we had reported ice falls. What are these ice falls? We went out, we picked the ice up and do things with it. And some professor in one of the schools said, hey, maybe the Soviets are firing at us with ice warheads, and we're telling them how accurate they have been. And reporting, hey, we picked up ice and we picked it up on the north side of Atlanta. But it turns out that it really was nothing more than ice fell from our airplanes now. You know, the Air Force, the military goes to very great extent to check things for all kinds of environments and for any type of aircraft or any other piece of equipment. They have what they call phase 5 testing. And phase 5 testing is nothing more than going out, creating a situation that's weather related and seeing whether or not the system still works like it's supposed to in this thing. So we had lots of that. We had a man come in to us and say that a spaceship landed on his yard in his grounds. He was a farmer, and that they traded with him. He gave them water and they gave him cakes. So, and he said, and I can prove to that. And yet, with all these cakes. And he said, that he didn't ask himself questions like, how in the world did they ever have enough water to get from wherever they were for a year in the first place? But when I went to town to investigate, I usually go past the police, sheriff, or somebody and say, I'm in town, I'm going to be talking to people. And then they call you up and say, who's this crazy guy? Just asking us things like this. So I did that, and he said, the judge wants to see you. So, okay, fine. So I went to see the judge, and he said to me, I just want you to know, there's only one person in town that can call somebody crazy. That's me. In other words, he picking me up, so I didn't come back and said, that guy was nuts. But we set the pancakes, and I call them pancakes now because that's what they were, to Food and Drug Administration and to a private enterprise that we had on the contract in New York. And they told us exactly what it was. They told all the constituents of the material. And Food and Drug Administration even knew who they were, because they keep that kind of thing in case people try to protect their own, whatever they want to call it. I don't know. But anyway, so we had a lot of fun. But they say they discontinued the program. Well, they discontinued a part of the program like that. In other words, our defense system still reacts to anything that could be a threat to our national security. They're gonna do it, and they'll continue doing that. The only thing that they don't have is the follow-up part, which is like sending these things to info analysis and so forth. But you should really and truthfully know the signature of all kinds of things that don't constitute a threat, so that keeps you from having to trigger your system and then find yourself having to recycle it. And so that's when you're most vulnerable while you're doing the recycling process.
Colonel Friend, thank you so much. Colonel Friend will answer more questions, I'm sure, delightfully upstairs at the reception. We have a surprise birthday cake. He turns 96, or 29. I think that makes him a leap year baby, which makes him actually 24. Based on his energy and recollection, I think that sounds about right. So if you'll all join me in singing Happy Birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, girlfriend. Happy birthday to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. If you are a friend of the Marshall Foundation, your support enables us to present events like this. If you are not a friend, please consider becoming a friend. Enjoy the exhibition, enjoy the reception, and Colonel Friend will be up there too. Thank you for coming.